The humming of the docking bay airlock was the only sound as Thomas Reed adjusted his tool belt. The Earth Space Authority had warned him this assignment would be unlike any repair job he'd handled before. First human technician to board a Cygni vessel, his supervisor had said with a mixture of pride and concern. "Don't screw it up." Thomas checked his universal translator one last time. The device, nestled snugly behind his ear, represented humanity's best attempt at deciphering the complex tonal language of the Cygni. He took a deep breath as the airlock completed its cycle. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a corridor illuminated by a bluish ambient light that seemed to pulse gently, almost like a heartbeat. The architecture was all curves and flowing lines, no sharp angles or corners anywhere. Thomas stepped forward, his boots making a dull thud against the metallic floor. "Welcome aboard the Astralis," came a melodic voice from the translator. The words in his ear were English, but he could hear the underlying tonal shifts and clicks of the native Cygni language. Thomas turned to face the speaker and nearly dropped his toolkit. The alien standing before him was tall and slender, with iridescent skin that shifted between blue and purple depending on how the light hit it. Large, almond-shaped eyes regarded him with what he could only interpret as curiosity. "Captain Vela," the alien introduced herself, placing a six-fingered hand against her chest in what Thomas assumed was a greeting gesture. "Chief Engineer of the Astralis." "Thomas Reed," he replied, awkwardly mimicking the gesture. "Earth Space Authority. I'm here about your propulsion systems?" Vela's head tilted slightly. The translator rendered her response, "Yes. We are grateful for your assistance. Our journey has been long, and the damage sustained during our passage through your solar system's debris field has compromised our ability to reach home." Thomas nodded, trying not to stare at Vela's distinctly non-human features. Despite her alien appearance, there was something almost familiar about her proportions, bipedal, with arms and legs arranged similarly to humans, though more graceful in their movements. "I'll need to see the engine core," Thomas said, shifting his weight uncomfortably. This was the part he'd been trained for. Machines he understood, alien diplomacy, not so much. "Of course," Vela replied. "Follow me." As they walked through the ship, Thomas noticed the temperature gradually increasing. Sweat began to bead on his forehead. The Cygni apparently preferred their environment warmer than humans. "Is the temperature uncomfortable for you?" Vela asked, noticing his discomfort. "We can adjust for your physiology." "I'm fine," Thomas insisted, not wanting to create more work. "Just different from what I'm used to." The engine room was a marvel of technology. Pulsating energy cores arranged in a circular formation created what looked like a miniature galaxy at the center of the chamber. Thomas had studied the schematics provided by the Cygni, but seeing it in person was entirely different. "This is incredible," he breathed. Vela made a sound that the translator didn't catch, perhaps a laugh or expression of pride. "This is the heart of our vessel. The damage occurred in the tertiary coupling system." She gestured toward a section where the pulsing energy seemed dimmer. Thomas approached cautiously, scanning the system with his diagnostic tools. "I see the problem. The energy flow is being diverted. It's no wonder your propulsion is compromised." As he began preliminary diagnostics, Vela moved closer, observing his work with obvious interest. "Your species has developed remarkable technological understanding despite your isolation." Thomas smiled despite himself. "We're quick learners." For the next hour, Thomas worked methodically, mapping out the alien system and comparing it to his reference materials. The Cygni technology operated on principles that seemed to blend quantum mechanics with something else entirely, something Earth scientists had only theorized about. "This will take longer than I initially thought," Thomas admitted. "The damage extends into the secondary systems as well." Vela's skin shifted to a deeper purple. "Then you will need to remain aboard longer. Is this acceptable?" Thomas considered the implications. No human had spent extended time on a Cygni vessel. His report would be valuable beyond just the repair work. Yes, he decided. I'll need to inform my superiors, but I believe I can repair this. It might take several days. Then it is settled, Vela said, her skin brightening. You will be our honored guest until repairs are complete. She made a gesture with her hands that the translator couldn't interpret. Thomas nodded, suddenly aware that he was about to learn a lot more about the Cygni than anyone had anticipated. As Vela led him toward what would be his quarters, he couldn't shake the feeling that this assignment was going to change everything, for him, and possibly for human-Cygni relations entirely. The quarters assigned to Thomas were surprisingly comfortable despite their alien design. A sleep platform molded itself to his body when he tested it, and environmental controls had been adjusted to human comfortable temperatures. After reporting his extended stay to Earth Space Authority, Thomas returned to work on the damaged propulsion system. By his second day aboard the Astrolise, Thomas had made significant progress mapping the damage. The ship's core technology, what the Cygni called the resonance matrix, operated on principles that defied conventional physics. Yet there was an elegant logic to it that Thomas found himself appreciating more with each passing hour. Your understanding grows quickly, Vela observed as she entered the engine room. Today her skin shimmered with a lighter blue tone, which Thomas had begun to associate with a positive mood. The principles aren't entirely foreign, Thomas replied, wiping sweat from his brow. Despite the temperature adjustments in his quarters, the engine room remained stubbornly warm. We've theorized similar systems but never implemented them successfully. Vela moved closer, observing his work on the tertiary coupling. Perhaps our people have more in common than initially believed. Thomas smiled politely, trying to focus on realigning the energy pathways. The repair required both physical adjustments and recalibration of the energy flow, a delicate balance. I've been meaning to ask, Thomas said, filling the silence that had settled between them. How long has your species been traveling among the stars? By your Earth calendar, approximately 8 centuries, Vela replied. The Astrolise itself is what you might call a scientific vessel. We explore and catalog new systems. So you're scientists? Thomas asked, intrigued. The diplomatic briefings had been vague about Cygni society. I am what translates closest to knowledge seeker, Vela said. Though our understanding of roles differs from yours. As Thomas continued working, he noticed Vela studying him with increasing intensity. Her large, luminous eyes followed his movements with what seemed like fascination. Your manual dexterity is impressive, she commented. 5 fingers provide adequate manipulation? Thomas laughed. We manage. Though I imagine 6 fingers would be helpful in this line of work. The translator couldn't quite capture the musical sound Vela made in response, but Thomas interpreted it as amusement. Your work has progressed well, Vela said after observing for nearly an hour. The evening meal cycle approaches. Would you join me in my private quarters? I wish to express gratitude for your assistance in our cultural manner. Of course, Thomas replied, setting down his tools. Cultural exchange was part of his mission brief, after all. Vela's private chambers were more elaborate than Thomas had expected. The walls displayed what appeared to be holographic renderings of alien landscapes, perhaps her homeworld. A low table in the center held several containers of unfamiliar substances. These are compatible with human physiology, Vela assured him, gesturing to the spread. We analyzed your nutritional requirements. Thomas sampled what looked like blue crystalline structures, finding them surprisingly sweet and refreshing. The meal progressed with conversation about their respective worlds, technological advancements, and cultural differences. In Cygni tradition, Vela explained as they finished eating, honored guests are welcomed through the ritual of Akri Shalva, the sharing of true selves. Before Thomas could ask what that meant, Vela rose gracefully and began unfastening the material of her garment. Thomas froze, his translator suddenly seeming inadequate for the situation unfolding before him. "Vela, I'm not sure I understand," Thomas began, but his voice caught as the Cygni captain removed her outer covering, revealing her iridescent skin beneath. "This is our way," Vela explained calmly, her skin pulsing with patterns of light that traveled across her form. To show oneself without barriers is the highest form of trust and respect. Thomas sat rigidly, unsure how to respond. The diplomatic briefing had mentioned nothing about this aspect of Cygni culture. Was this a test? A misunderstanding? Or something he was expected to reciprocate? Thomas struggled to find words. In human culture, this type of unburdening has different implications. Vela's patterns shifted, her skin darkening slightly. "You find our custom disturbing?" "Not disturbing," Thomas clarified quickly, aware that a cultural misstep could jeopardize not just his mission but potentially future human-Cygni relations. "Just unexpected. Humans typically reserve unveiling ourselves for very specific contexts." Vela moved closer, her movements fluid and graceful. The universal translator cannot fully convey the nuance of Akrishalva. It is not merely physical, it represents the dropping of pretenses between different beings. As she sat beside him, Thomas noticed that what he had mistaken for nakedness was actually a revealing of Vela's true skin, which itself seemed to function as both covering and communication. The patterns flowing across her surface carried meaning beyond what his eyes could interpret. "Your discomfort is understandable," Vela said, her voice gentler. "Perhaps I should have explained more thoroughly before proceeding." Thomas took a deep breath, reminding himself that understanding alien cultures was part of his job. "Perhaps we can find a compromise? A way to honor your tradition while respecting my cultural boundaries?" Vela considered this, her skin shifting to a thoughtful purple hue. "Would you be comfortable sharing words of truth instead? Speaking that which is normally hidden?" Relief washed over Thomas. "Yes, that I can do." As the evening progressed, Thomas found himself sharing stories of Earth, his personal hopes, and even his initial trepidation about this assignment. Vela, still in her unburdened state, shared tales of distant worlds and Cygni philosophy. When Thomas finally returned to his quarters, his mind raced with the day's events. The cultural gap between them was wider than he had anticipated, yet somehow, they had found a way to bridge it. Tomorrow would bring more repairs, and undoubtedly more cultural discoveries. Thomas awoke the next morning with his mind still processing yesterday's cultural exchange with Vela. The misunderstanding had been awkward but enlightening, a genuine opportunity to learn about Cygni customs firsthand. Stretching, he prepared for another day of repairs, determined to make significant progress on the ship's systems. When he arrived at the engine room, Thomas was surprised to find Vela already there, her skin now covered with the standard Cygni attire. She acknowledged him with a slight nod. "I have been considering our interaction," she said without preamble. "I believe I must apologize for my presumption." Thomas shook his head. "No apology necessary. Cross-cultural understanding takes time. I'm just glad we found a way to communicate through it." Vela's skin flickered with subtle patterns beneath her clothing, a reaction the translator couldn't interpret, but Thomas sensed was positive. "I've researched human customs overnight," Vela continued. "Your species places great emphasis on physical boundaries and progressive trust building." "That's surprisingly accurate," Thomas replied, impressed by her initiative. "Though like any species, we're diverse in our customs." As Thomas began work on the damaged coupling system, Vela stayed nearby, assisting by passing tools and explaining the finer points of Cygni technology. Their conversation flowed more naturally now, the previous day's awkwardness gradually dissolving. "So in your culture," Thomas asked, carefully adjusting a resonance modulator, "the Akrishalva is performed with all honored guests. Is it common?" Not common, Vela clarified, her voice melodic even through the translator. It is reserved for those we wish to form lasting bonds with. Your Earth representatives have never stayed aboard long enough to reach such status. Thomas felt strangely honored by this revelation. So I'm the first human to experience it? Yes. Our leadership believed a more profound connection would benefit future relations between our peoples. As the day progressed, Thomas learned more about Cygni society, how their homeworld's unique electromagnetic fields had influenced their evolution, giving them skin that served as both protection and communication medium. The patterns they displayed were a language unto themselves, expressing nuances their verbal language couldn't capture. That explains why the translator sometimes struggles, Thomas realized. It's only capturing part of what you're saying. Precisely, Vela confirmed. Just as I cannot fully understand your facial expressions and body language, though I'm learning. By midday, Thomas had reached a critical juncture in the repairs. The damaged tertiary coupling needed to be completely recalibrated, a process requiring extreme precision. This will be tricky, he warned, wiping sweat from his brow. The energy flow needs to be reduced to 20%, but maintained at exactly that level while I replace these components. Vela's expression turned serious. Too low, and the resonance matrix will destabilize. Too high, and the new components could be damaged instantly. Thomas nodded. Exactly. Can you monitor the flow rates and give me real-time feedback? Working in tandem, they began the delicate procedure. Thomas felt a new level of trust forming between them as Vela called out readings in her native language, which the translator converted to technical specifications he could understand. Her precision was impressive. Clearly, she knew her ship intimately. Energy fluctuation detected, Vela suddenly announced, her skin darkening with concern beneath her garments. The matrix is becoming unstable. Thomas worked faster, fingers deftly connecting the replacement components. Almost there. Just need to seal the connection and... A sudden power surge sent sparks flying from the coupling. Thomas jerked back instinctively, but not before a shower of energy particles cascaded across his arm. He hissed in pain as the particles burned through his sleeve. Thomas. Vela was beside him instantly, concern evident in her voice. You're injured. I'll be fine, he assured her through gritted teeth. But we need to stabilize that coupling before. The ship's lights flickered ominously, and a low-pitched alarm began to sound. Primary resonance destabilizing, announced an automated voice in Cygni, which the translator struggled to keep up with. Cascade failure imminent. Ignoring the pain in his arm, Thomas turned back to the coupling. We need to complete the connection now, or the whole system could collapse. Vela hesitated only a moment before making a decision. She removed her outer garment, revealing her communicative skin, which now glowed with intense patterns. I can absorb some of the energy overflow through direct contact. My species evolved to channel electromagnetic energy. Thomas understood immediately. Do it. As Thomas worked to complete the connection, Vela placed her hands directly on the adjacent power conduits. Her skin flared brightly as she absorbed excess energy, redirecting it through her body's natural conductivity. The translator fell silent, unable to interpret the complex patterns racing across her exposed skin. With the energy stabilized, Thomas completed the final connections. The alarm ceased, and the ship's lights returned to normal illumination. He stepped back, breathing heavily, only then becoming fully aware of the burning sensation along his arm. You need medical attention, Vela insisted, her skin still glowing from the absorbed energy. In the medical bay, a Cygni healing technician applied a cooling gel to Thomas's burns while Vela explained what had happened. The technician's skin displayed patterns that Thomas now recognized as concern. Your quick action prevented a major system failure, Vela told Thomas as his arm was being treated. Few of your kind would understand our technology well enough to accomplish such repairs. We made a good team, Thomas acknowledged. Your ability to channel the excess energy was remarkable. Vela's skin rippled with what might have been embarrassment. It is a natural ability, though rarely needed in such circumstances. Later, as they shared another meal in what Thomas now understood was a significant cultural practice, they discussed the day's events more personally. I believe I understand now, Thomas said thoughtfully. When you revealed yourself yesterday, it wasn't just about physical unburdening, it was about showing me your true means of communication. Vela's skin brightened appreciatively. Yes. The patterns I display are as much my voice as the words I speak. Today, when the translator failed during the crisis, you seemed to understand anyway. Thomas nodded, surprising himself with the realization. I did, somehow. I'm beginning to recognize certain patterns. As they continued talking late into the ship's night cycle, Thomas felt a growing connection to Vela that transcended their cultural differences. The crisis had forged something unexpected between them, a bridge of understanding that mere words could never have built. The fourth day aboard the Astrolise began with renewed purpose. Thomas's injured arm had responded well to the Cygni healing treatment, leaving only mild discomfort. As he made his way to the engine room, he found himself increasingly attuned to the ship itself, the subtle vibrations beneath his feet, the rhythmic hum of the systems, and the gentle pulse of the ambient lighting all seemed to communicate the vessel's status to him now. Your presence has become familiar to the ship, Vela observed when she joined him. Today her skin held a warm amber undertone that Thomas had not seen before. What do you mean? He asked, gathering his tools for the day's work. The Astrolise responds to those who understand her, Vela explained. Our ships are partially biological, synchronized with their crews through resonance fields. Thomas paused, processing this new information. Are you saying the ship is alive? Not as you understand life, Vela clarified, but not entirely mechanical either. It exists in the space between your concepts of organic and inorganic. This revelation shifted Thomas's entire understanding of the repairs he'd been conducting. He wasn't just fixing machinery, he was healing a semi-sentient entity. The realization both fascinated and humbled him. That explains why conventional diagnostic methods gave inconsistent results, he mused, recalling his initial confusion with the ship's systems. Vela's skin flickered with approval. You adapt quickly to new paradigms. A valuable trait. They spent the morning completing repairs on the tertiary coupling and began work on the secondary systems. Their efficiency had improved dramatically, with Vela anticipating Thomas's needs before he could voice them, and Thomas understanding Vela's instructions even when the translator struggled with technical terminology. During a brief rest period, Thomas studied Vela more openly than he had before. Her movements were graceful and precise, her tall frame moving with an efficiency that spoke of complete harmony with her environment. When she noticed his attention, her skin rippled with questioning patterns. I was just thinking, Thomas admitted, how different our species are, yet how similar in other ways. We both value knowledge, exploration, and connection, Vela added, her voice softening. Though we express it differently. A moment of understanding passed between them, charged with something beyond mere professional cooperation. Thomas felt a pull toward her that transcended cultural curiosity, a connection he hadn't anticipated forming. The ship's alert system interrupted the moment, a series of urgent tones filling the engine room. Gravitational anomaly detected, came the automated announcement. Collision course with uncharted debris field. Vela's skin darkened instantly. The navigation systems are still compromised from the initial damage. Without full propulsion capabilities, we cannot alter course quickly enough. Thomas's mind raced through possibilities. The primary drive, could we bring it online temporarily? Just enough for evasive maneuvers? Too risky with incomplete repairs, Vela countered, already moving toward the main control interface. But perhaps we can divert emergency power to the maneuvering thrusters. They rushed to the bridge, where the rest of the small Cygni crew were already responding to the crisis. A massive view screen displayed the approaching debris field, fragments of what might have once been a small moon or asteroid, now scattered across their path. "Impact in 14 minutes, announced a crew member, their skin pulsing urgently. "Thrusters at 18% capacity," reported another. "Insufficient for complete evasion." Vela took command seamlessly, directing her crew while explaining to Thomas, "We can reduce impact, but not avoid it entirely. The ship's defensive shields are also compromised." Thomas studied the navigational display, an idea forming. "What if we don't try to avoid it completely? Look at the distribution pattern, there's a less dense section here." He pointed to the screen. "If we focus all power on a controlled trajectory through that gap, we could minimize impacts." Vela analyzed his suggestion, her skin patterns shifting rapidly as she calculated possibilities. It could work, but would require precise timing and manual thruster control. "Our automated systems aren't responsive enough in their damaged state." "I could do it," Thomas offered. "My experience with Earth's emergency response vessels included manual navigation through asteroid fields." A moment of silence fell over the bridge as the Cygni crew exchanged looks, and undoubtedly skin patterns, that Thomas couldn't fully interpret. "Very well," Vela decided. "We will entrust our ship's passage to you, Thomas Reed." The gravity of her decision wasn't lost on him. This was unprecedented trust placed in a human by a Cygni captain. Thomas was guided to the navigation station, where the controls were hastily reconfigured to accommodate human operation. The interface was alien, but the principles were familiar enough: thrust vectors, rotational controls, and power distribution. "Impact in 8 minutes, came the update. Thomas familiarized himself with the controls, making several test adjustments as Vela stood close behind him, her presence both reassuring and distracting. "The ship will respond differently than you're accustomed to," she warned. "It anticipates intentions as much as it follows commands." "Like riding a living creature rather than operating a machine," Thomas nodded. "I understand." As the debris field loomed larger on the view screen, Thomas closed his eyes briefly, centering himself. When he opened them, his focus narrowed to the task at hand. His hands moved across the controls with increasing confidence as he felt the ship responding to his guidance. Entering debris field perimeter in 3, 2, 1. The first impacts were minor, small fragments bouncing off the remaining shields. Thomas adjusted their trajectory constantly, feeling for the ship's responses and compensating for its wounded state. The vessel shuddered around them as larger pieces scraped along its hull. "Port shield failing," reported a crew member. Thomas immediately adjusted, rolling the ship slightly to protect its vulnerable side. His hands moved instinctively now, guided by a combination of training, intuition, and an unexpected connection with the vessel itself. A particularly large asteroid fragment appeared directly in their path. Thomas fired the forward thrusters in a precise sequence, sending the ship into a controlled dive that carried them beneath the obstacle with barely meters to spare. Vela's hand came to rest on his shoulder, her touch transmitting both support and concern. Thomas was acutely aware of her closeness as he navigated the final stretch of the debris field, the ship responding to his increasingly confident commands. And then, suddenly, they were clear, the view screen showing open space ahead once more. The bridge erupted in the musical sounds of Cygni expressions of relief. Thomas released his grip on the controls, suddenly aware of how tightly he'd been holding them. "You have saved the Astralise and her crew," Vela said, her voice carrying emotion the translator couldn't fully convey. "Such skill, such intuition." Thomas stood, finding himself unexpectedly unsteady after the intense concentration. Vela's hand remained on his shoulder, stabilizing him. "The ship helped," he said modestly. "It was like we understood each other." "Yes," Vela agreed, her skin glowing with a warm radiance that seemed to envelop them both. "The Astralese recognized you as I have, as someone worthy of trust." Their eyes met, and in that moment, the cultural divide between them seemed to dissolve completely. Thomas felt drawn to her in a way that transcended physical differences or professional boundaries. The air between them seemed charged with potential. A crew member's urgent report broke the moment. "Captain, hull breach detected in Section 12. Emergency containment activated." Vela's expression shifted instantly back to commanding officer. "We must secure the ship before we can celebrate our survival. There is still work to be done." As they moved to address the new crisis, Thomas caught Vela's gaze once more, receiving a pattern of skin luminescence that needed no translator, a promise that their connection would be revisited when duty allowed. The damage assessment following their passage through the debris field revealed both good and bad news. The Astralese had sustained additional hull breaches, but the core systems, including Thomas's nearly completed repairs, had remained largely intact. The emergency bulkheads had contained the atmospheric loss, and no crew members had been injured. Thomas worked alongside the Cygni repair teams through what would have been night by Earth standards, his body running on adrenaline and a sense of shared purpose. By the time he finally returned to his quarters for rest, exhaustion had settled deep in his bones. He had barely closed his eyes when a soft chime announced a visitor at his door. "Enter," he called, forcing himself to sit up. Vela stepped into his quarters, her skin glowing softly in the dimmed lighting. She had changed from her captain's attire to what appeared to be more casual Cygni garments, flowing material that complemented rather than concealed the patterns of her luminescent skin. "I apologize for disturbing your rest period," she said, remaining near the doorway. "No need," Thomas assured her, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "Is everything all right with the ship?" "The Astralese is stabilized," Vela confirmed. "But that is not why I've come." She moved closer, her movements carrying an unusual hesitance. "Our journey together is nearing its conclusion. The repairs will be complete within another Earth day." Thomas felt an unexpected pang at this reminder. "That soon? I suppose that's good news." "For the mission, yes," Vela agreed, her skin displaying subtle patterns that conveyed more complexity than her words. "Yet I find myself reluctant to see our cooperation end." The admission hung in the air between them, charged with unspoken implications. "I understand," Thomas said quietly. "I've been thinking the same thing." Vela moved closer, sitting beside him on the edge of the sleep platform. "In my many cycles exploring the stars, I have never encountered a being from another world with whom I felt such resonance." Thomas smiled at her choice of words. "Resonance? Like your ship's systems?" "Yes. A harmony that transcends our differences." Her skin brightened, patterns flowing across her surface in what Thomas had come to recognize as expressions of deep emotion. "Thomas Reed, I wish to complete the Akri Shalva with you, not merely as diplomatic exchange, but as true connection." Her meaning was clear, even without the translator's interpretation. Thomas felt his pulse quicken as he considered the implications. The past days had created something between them that defied easy categorization, beyond cultural exchange, beyond professional cooperation. "Are you certain?" he asked, aware of the significance such an exchange would hold in Cygni culture. In response, Vela reached out, her six-fingered hand gently touching his face. The contact sent a tingling sensation across his skin, a mild electromagnetic current that was neither unpleasant nor entirely human in its effect. "I am certain," she said simply. What followed transcended both human and Cygni expectations. Their differences, physiological, cultural, evolutionary, became points of discovery rather than barriers. Vela's bioelectric skin created sensations Thomas had never experienced, while his human responses fascinated her in turn. Their kiss bridged worlds, an exchange of understanding deeper than either had anticipated. Their connection was both alien and profoundly natural, guided by the universal language of desire and tenderness that seemed to transcend species. Vela's skin illuminated the darkened room with patterns that spoke her emotions more eloquently than words, while Thomas expressed himself through touch and murmured phrases that the translator couldn't, or perhaps didn't need to, convert. In the aftermath, they lay together in comfortable silence, the gentle hum of the ship surrounding them like a protective cocoon. "Your kind fears differences," Vela observed, her fingers tracing patterns on Thomas's arm where the burn had nearly healed. "Yet you embraced mine. Maybe that's what space exploration is really about," Thomas replied thoughtfully. "Not just finding new worlds, but new ways of seeing, of being. Of connecting." Morning came too quickly. The final repairs proceeded efficiently, their working relationship now infused with a deeper understanding that the crew recognized but tactfully didn't acknowledge. By midday, the propulsion system was fully restored, the resonance matrix stabilized, and the Astrolise ready to continue its journey. In the docking bay, Thomas prepared for departure. His report to Earth Space Authority would be comprehensive regarding the technical aspects of the repair mission, though certain personal details would remain private, a secret shared between human and Cygni. The Cygni High Council has expressed interest in establishing a more permanent technological exchange program, Vela informed him as they stood before the airlock. "They have asked if you would consider serving as the human liaison." Thomas couldn't hide his surprise, or his immediate interest. "Me? I'm just an engineer, not a diplomat." Vela's skin rippled with what he now recognized as amusement. "You have proven to be both, Thomas Reed. Your understanding of our technology and culture has advanced further in 5 cycles than all previous human delegates combined. The opportunity was unexpected but undeniably appealing. Extended work with Cygni technology would advance human understanding by decades, and the personal implications. I would need to discuss it with my superiors," he said carefully. "But speaking personally, I'm very interested." "Then I will await Earth's official response," Vela replied formally, though her skin betrayed her pleasure at his answer. Until then, the Astrolise must continue its scientific mission. They stood facing each other, aware of the watching crew members but unconcerned by their presence. What had formed between them was neither human nor Cygni, but something entirely new, a bridge between worlds. "Safe travels, Captain Vela," Thomas said, extending his hand in the human gesture of farewell. Vela took his hand, but then drew him closer, pressing her forehead against his in the Cygni tradition. Her skin glowed with farewell patterns, but also with promise. "Until our paths cross again," she whispered, her true voice harmonizing with the translator's rendering. As the airlock closed between them, Thomas knew with certainty that this ending was merely the beginning of a much larger journey, one that would forever alter the relationship between their species, and between 2 individuals who had discovered connection across the vast differences of space. The Astrolise departed Earth orbit the following day, its lights visible from the space station window as it accelerated toward distant stars. Thomas watched it go, already preparing his recommendation for the exchange program and anticipating the day when humanity's understanding of the universe, and his own journey among the stars, would continue with Vela by his side.